I never thought silence could be so loud until the night my roommate Reed asked me why I always went quiet whenever he talked about girls. We were sitting on our beat-up couch in our tiny apartment, the one with the broken spring on the left side that we both avoided, and he just turned to me during a commercial break and asked, just like that, "Why do you always get weird when I talk about dating?" My stomach dropped. I felt every muscle in my body tense up like I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't, even though I was just sitting there with a beer in my hand watching a basketball game. I tried to laugh it off, told him I didn't know what he was talking about, but Reed had this way of looking at people that made lying impossible. He had these gray-green eyes that seemed to see right through whatever bullshit you were trying to sell, and right then they were fixed on me, waiting. We'd been roommates for 8 months. We met through a housing app when I desperately needed a place after my previous living situation fell apart, and he had a spare room in his 2-bedroom near campus. The rent was reasonable, the location was perfect, and when I met him to look at the place, he seemed normal enough. Tall, athletic build from playing intramural soccer, messy dark hair that he was always running his fingers through, and an easy smile that made you feel like you'd known him longer than 5 minutes. I signed the lease the same day. Living with Reed was effortless in a way I hadn't expected. He was clean but not obsessive, social but respected quiet time, and had this natural warmth that made our apartment feel like an actual home instead of just a place to sleep between classes and work shifts. We fell into rhythms without trying. Morning coffee together before he headed to his engineering lectures and I went to my design studio, alternating who cooked dinner. Weekend grocery runs where we'd argue about which brand of pasta sauce was superior. It was comfortable, easy, normal. Except it wasn't normal, not for me, because somewhere between the 2nd month and the 3rd, I'd developed feelings that had absolutely no business existing. It started small. I'd noticed the way he laughed at stupid jokes, this full body thing where his whole face lit up. Or how he'd absently touch my shoulder when he walked past me in the kitchen, the way he looked in the morning with his hair sticking up, squinting at the coffee maker like it had personally offended him. Little things that I collected without meaning to, storing them away like treasures I had no right to keep. By month 5, I was in trouble. Real, serious trouble. The kind where I'd lie in bed at night and hear him moving around in his room next door and feel this ache in my chest that I couldn't explain away. The kind where I started timing my showers for after he left for class because I couldn't trust myself to act normal in the bathroom we shared when I could still smell his soap in the steam. The kind where every casual touch felt like it burned through my skin and I had to remind myself that he was straight, he was my roommate, and I was being an idiot. Reed dated. Of course he dated. He was smart and funny and genuinely kind in a way that seemed rare. Girls noticed him. He'd go out on Friday nights and sometimes come home late, and I'd hear his key in the lock from my bedroom and feel this twisted mix of relief that he was home and something darker that I refused to name. He'd tell me about his dates sometimes. Casual mentions over breakfast or while we were watching TV, and I taught myself to nod and smile and ask appropriate follow-up questions while everything inside me went cold and quiet. That's what he'd noticed. The quiet. The way I'd suddenly become very interested in my phone or the TV or literally anything else when he started talking about whatever girl he'd taken to dinner. The way my contributions to the conversation would dry up, my responses turning to one-word acknowledgments until he'd changed the subject. I thought I'd been subtle. Apparently, I was wrong. So there we were, commercial break during a game neither of us really cared about, and Reed was asking me why I got weird, and I had no idea what to say. My mind was racing through possible responses, excuses, deflections, anything to get out of this conversation, but my mouth wasn't cooperating. The silence stretched between us like a physical thing, filling the small space of our living room until it felt suffocating. I could have lied, should have lied, could have made up something about being tired of hearing about other people's dating lives when mine was non-existent. could have joked about him bragging, could have done a dozen things that would have redirected the conversation to safer ground. Instead, I took a long drink of my beer and said, "Because I'm gay, Reed. That's why I get weird." The words hung in the air between us. I couldn't look at him. I stared at the TV screen where a car commercial was playing, some SUV driving through impossible terrain, and waited for everything to fall apart. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'd never said those words out loud to anyone who mattered, anyone whose reaction could genuinely hurt me, and now I'd just thrown them at my straight roommate, who I was unfortunately in love with, in our living room on a random Tuesday night. Reed didn't say anything at first. The silence was different now, heavier, loaded with all the things I couldn't take back. I risked a glance at him and found him looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not disgust, which was something. Not pity either. Just this intense focus, like he was trying to solve a complicated equation in his head. "Okay," he said finally. His voice was quiet, careful. "Okay. Is that why you've been different lately? Not just with the dating stuff, but like, in general?" I hadn't realized I'd been different in general, but as soon as he said it, I knew he was right. I'd been pulling back, creating distance, trying to protect myself from feelings that kept growing despite my best efforts to starve them. I'd been eating dinner in my room more often, finding excuses to be out of the apartment, keeping our interactions surface level and brief. I thought I was being smart. I thought I was managing the situation. "Yeah," I said. "Probably. I'm sorry. I know this is weird. I can look for a new place if you want, if this makes things too uncomfortable." "What?" "No." Reed turned to face me fully, his knee bumping against mine on the couch, and I had to resist the urge to pull away from the contact. "Why would you need to move out?" I finally looked at him properly. He seemed genuinely confused, not angry or uncomfortable. Just puzzled. "Because I just told you I'm gay," I said, spelling it out because apparently I needed to. "And we live together, and you're straight, and I just made things weird." "You being gay doesn't make things weird," Reed said. He was still looking at me with those steady eyes. "You pulling away and acting like I did something wrong, that made things weird. I thought I'd pissed you off somehow. I've been trying to figure out what I did for like 2 months. Something loosened in my chest, just slightly." "You didn't do anything," I told him. "This isn't about you." "Well, I mean." I stopped, realizing I was about to say too much, but Reed was leaning forward now, paying attention in a way that made it impossible to retreat. "It is about me," he said slowly. "Isn't it? The way you get quiet when I talk about dating. That's not just because you're gay. That's something else." I should have denied it. Should have laughed it off, told him he was reading too much into things, rebuilt the walls I'd just accidentally demolished. Instead, I felt something break inside me, all the careful control I'd maintained for months, cracking under the weight of his attention and the beer and the exhaustion of hiding. "Yeah," I said. "It's something else." Reed sat back, and I watched him process this information. His hand came up to run through his hair, that familiar gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, and I waited for the rejection, the awkwardness, the careful establishment of boundaries. Waited for him to be kind about it because Reed was kind, but firm. Waited for the friendship to fundamentally change into something careful and distant. "How long?" he asked instead. "What? How long have you had feelings for me?" The direct question surprised me enough that I answered honestly. "I don't know. A while. Couple months, maybe more. I wasn't planning on telling you. I wasn't planning on telling anyone. I was just going to deal with it until it went away." "Does it work like that?" Reed asked. "Does it just go away?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I haven't really had a lot of experience with this. You're kind of my first real crush on someone I actually know. Someone who's actually in my life." Reed was quiet again, but he hadn't moved away. If anything, he'd shifted slightly closer, his arm resting along the back of the couch behind me. "I'm trying to think," he said, "if I've done anything that might have made this harder for you. Like, have I been an asshole about it without realizing?" "No," I said quickly. "You've been you. That's the problem. You're a good person, Reed. You're funny and you actually listen when people talk and you remember things like how I take my coffee or that I hate mushrooms or whatever. You make this place feel like home. That's not something you did wrong. That's just who you are." He absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. The game had come back on, but neither of us was watching it anymore. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "And you can tell me if it's too personal or whatever." "At this point, I don't think we have much left in terms of boundaries," I said, trying for humor. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Fair." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "When I talk about girls, about dating, does it hurt? Like, actually hurt?" I wanted to lie, to minimize it, to protect both of us from the truth. But I was tired of lying, and something about the way he was asking, like my answer genuinely mattered to him, made me honest. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It does. Not because I think I have any right to feel that way. I know you're straight. I know you see me as a friend and a roommate, and I know these feelings are my problem to deal with. But yeah, hearing about you with other people, it hurts." Reed nodded slowly. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said something I wasn't expecting. "I don't think I'm as straight as I thought I was." The words didn't make sense at first. I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said, wondering if I'd misheard. "What?" "I've been thinking about this for a while," Reed said. He wasn't looking at me now, his gaze fixed on his hands. "Couple months, actually. Around the same time you started getting weird. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into normal roommate stuff, but I don't think I was. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest, hope and fear tangled together." "Reed, I don't understand what you're saying." He looked at me then, and there was something vulnerable in his expression that I'd never seen before. "I'm saying that I notice things too. I notice when you come home. I notice what you wear and how you do your hair. I notice when you're stressed about a project and when you're excited about something. I make excuses to hang out in the kitchen when you're cooking because I like being around you. I've started turning down dates because I'd rather stay home and watch TV with you on the couch. I couldn't breathe. This felt like a dream, like something my brain would conjure up at 3 a.m. that I'd have to wake up from and feel worse about reality." "You're just being a good friend," I managed. "Maybe," Reed said, "or maybe I've been lying to myself about what I want." He shifted on the couch, turning to face me more directly. "I've been with girls because that's what I was supposed to do, what was expected, what made sense, and I liked them, I did, but it always felt like something was missing. Like I was going through the motions of what dating was supposed to be without actually feeling it." "And now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now I can't stop thinking about my roommate," Reed said. He smiled, but it was nervous, uncertain. "Now I notice that I find excuses to touch your shoulder when I walk past. Now I realize that I've been talking about dates to try to get a reaction from you, to see if you cared, because I'm apparently an idiot who doesn't know how to just use words. Now I'm sitting here realizing that the person I'm most comfortable with, the person I want to spend time with, the person who makes me laugh and makes this place feel like home, is you." "This isn't real," I said. "This is not happening." "It's happening," Reed said. "And I'm terrified, if that helps. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never felt this way about a guy before. I've never felt this way about anyone before, actually. So if you want to tell me I'm confused or experimenting or whatever, I'll understand." "Are you?" I asked. "Confused or experimenting?" I don't think so, he said. I think I've been figuring something out about myself, and you've been part of that process whether I meant for you to be or not. And I think the reason I asked you tonight why you get quiet is because I couldn't stand you pulling away anymore. I needed to know if I'd completely misread everything, or if maybe, possibly, you felt something too. I feel something, I said. Obviously. But Reed, this is huge. This isn't something to rush into because we had a weird conversation on the couch. You need to be sure. You need to actually think about what this means. I have been thinking about it, he said, for months. I just didn't have the guts to say anything until tonight. Until you looked like you were going to bolt, and I realized I might lose you entirely if I didn't. We sat there, the TV playing to an audience of no one, the weight of everything we'd said settling around us. My mind was racing, trying to catch up to this new reality where my straight roommate had just told me he had feelings for me, where the crush I'd been trying to bury had somehow been mutual all along. So, what do we do now? I asked finally. Reed considered this. I don't know, he admitted. I don't have a roadmap for this, but maybe we could start small, see what this is without putting too much pressure on it. What does small look like? He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. His hand found mine where it was resting on my knee, his fingers threading through mine carefully, like he was testing whether this was okay. Maybe it looks like this, he said. Maybe it looks like being honest instead of hiding. Maybe it looks like figuring this out together. His hand was warm, slightly calloused from soccer, and the simple contact sent electricity up my arm. I'd imagined this, late at night when I couldn't sleep, but the reality was different, better, more real and solid and terrifying. What if we mess this up? I asked. What if we try this and it doesn't work and we ruin everything? What if we don't try and spend the rest of our lives wondering what if? Reed countered. He squeezed my hand gently. Look, I'm scared too. I'm scared I'm going to be bad at this, that I won't know what I'm doing, that I'll hurt you without meaning to. But I'm more scared of pretending I don't feel this and watching you move out and losing you completely. I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at his face. He was watching me with an expression that was hopeful and nervous, and so openly vulnerable that it made my chest ache. This is insane, I said. Yeah, he agreed. Is that a no? It's not a no, I said. This is complicated and terrifying, and we should probably talk about this more when we haven't been drinking, and I need you to be really sure about what you're saying. I'm sure about wanting to try, Reed said. I'm sure about not wanting to lose you. I'm sure that right now, sitting here, holding your hand, is the most right thing has felt in a long time. The rest of it, the labels and the what-ifs and the complications, we can figure that out as we go. We stayed like that for a while, hands linked between us, the game playing out its final minutes on the screen. Eventually Reed said, "Can I try something?" And when I nodded, he leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to stop him. His lips brushed against mine, soft and questioning, and I felt the world tilt sideways. It was brief, barely more than a touch, but when he pulled back, he was smiling. "Okay," he said. "Yeah, definitely not as straight as I thought." I laughed, the sound surprised out of me, and some of the tension broke. "You're ridiculous," I told him. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm your ridiculous, if you want me to be." I did want that, despite all the logical reasons to be cautious, despite the complications and the fear and the potential for disaster. I wanted it so much it scared me. "Yeah," I said, "I want that." We didn't figure everything out that night. We stayed up late talking, really talking, about everything we'd been holding back. Reed told me about the first time he'd realized he was noticing me differently. This moment when I'd been cooking dinner and singing along to some song on my playlist, and he'd thought about how much he wanted to cross the kitchen and kiss me. I told him about the morning I'd realized I was in trouble, when he'd emerged from his room half asleep and smiled at me, and I'd felt my heart do something it had never done before. We talked about logistics, about what this meant for our living situation, about taking things slow and being honest with each other. We talked about his family, who he wasn't sure how to tell, and my family, who I hadn't come out to yet. We talked about fear and hope and all the uncertainty that lay ahead. When we finally went to bed, Reed stopped at his bedroom door and looked back at me. "Hey," he said. "Thank you for being honest tonight, for telling me the truth even though it was hard." "Thank you for not running away," I replied. He grinned. "Where would I run? I live here." The next morning felt different. I woke up and lay in bed for a moment, wondering if the previous night had been real or some elaborate dream. Then I heard movement in the kitchen and smelled coffee brewing, and I got up to find Reed making breakfast, still in his sleep shorts and a t-shirt, his hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning," he said when he saw me, and his smile was the same easy one I'd known for months, but there was something else in it now. Something that was just for me. "Morning," I said back. We moved around each other in the kitchen like we always had, but now when he passed behind me to reach the refrigerator, his hand lingered on my lower back. When I handed him his coffee, our fingers brushed and he didn't pull away. Small touches, casual intimacy, testing the waters of this new thing between us. The weeks that followed were a study in contradictions. Everything changed and nothing changed. We were still roommates, still had our routines and our rhythms, still argued about whose turn it was to take out the trash and whether we needed to buy more eggs. But now there were stolen kisses in the kitchen, Reed's arm around my shoulders on the couch, falling asleep together, watching movies and waking up tangled together. Reed approached this new aspect of himself with the same methodical curiosity he brought to his engineering projects. He asked questions, wanted to understand his feelings, worked through his uncertainty out loud. Some days he was confident, sure of what he wanted. Other days he was hesitant, worried he was doing everything wrong. I learned to read his moods, to know when he needed reassurance and when he needed space to think. We had our first real kiss about 2 weeks in, not the brief, tentative one from that first night, but something deeper, more certain. We were in his room, ostensibly studying, but we'd been talking instead, and at some point the conversation had drifted into comfortable silence. Reed had been looking at me with this expression I was starting to recognize, like he was working up the courage to do something, and then he'd leaned over and kissed me properly. When we broke apart, he was grinning. "I've been wanting to do that all day," he said. "What stopped you?" I asked. "Fear of being bad at it," he admitted. "Fear that I'd somehow mess it up." "You didn't mess it up," I assured him. "Good," he said, and kissed me again. We kept it quiet at first, not hiding exactly, but not broadcasting either. This thing between us felt fragile, precious, something to protect while we figured out what it was. But gradually we relaxed, stopped being so careful about how we acted around each other when friends came over. Let ourselves be affectionate in small ways. The first time one of Reed's soccer teammates noticed something and asked if we were together, Reed didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said, his hand finding mine. "We are." And the casual confidence in his voice, the ease with which he claimed this thing between us, made me fall for him even harder. It wasn't always easy. Reed had moments of doubt, times when the reality of being in a relationship with another guy hit him, and he had to work through what that meant. We had conversations about coming out, about labels, about what we wanted from each other. We had our first fight about something stupid, couldn't remember what, and had to learn how to navigate conflict when you lived with the person you were arguing with. But the good moments outweighed the hard ones. Reed meeting my eyes across a crowded room and smiling like I was the only person there. Lazy Sunday mornings in bed, talking about nothing and everything. The way he'd gotten into the habit of kissing my forehead before he left for class. Inside jokes that only we understood. The deep conversations at 2 in the morning when neither of us could sleep. One night, about 3 months after that first conversation on the couch, we were back in our usual spots watching TV, and Reed said, "I'm glad you went quiet." "What?" "When I talked about girls," he clarified. "I'm glad you went quiet, because it made me ask why, and asking why led to this." He gestured between us. "So I'm glad." "I'm glad you asked," I said. He pulled me closer, and I rested my head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his soap. "This is real, right?" he asked quietly. "This isn't just going to disappear?" "I think it's real," I said. "I think it's the most real thing I've ever felt." "Good," Reed said. "Because I'm in love with you, and it would be really inconvenient if this wasn't real." My heart stopped. He'd never said that before. Neither of us had, too cautious to put that weight on something so new. "You're in love with me?" I asked. "Yeah," he said simply. "I figured that out a while ago, actually. I was just waiting for the right time to say it. Is this the right time? Did I mess that up?" "You didn't mess it up," I told him. "And for the record, I'm in love with you too." He kissed me then, slow and sweet, and I thought about how none of this had been part of my plan. I hadn't planned on developing feelings for my straight roommate. Hadn't planned on him somehow not being straight after all. Hadn't planned on finding this kind of happiness in the small 2-bedroom apartment with the broken couch spring and the temperamental shower. But sometimes the best things are the ones you don't plan for. Sometimes love finds you in the quiet moments, in the spaces between words, in the courage to be honest when it would be easier to hide. Sometimes your straight roommate asks why you went quiet, and that simple question changes everything. We're still figuring it out, Reed and me. Still learning how to be together, how to navigate this relationship that neither of us expected. But we're doing it together, in our apartment with its familiar rhythms and new intimacies, and every day I'm grateful for that night on the couch when I decided to tell the truth and for Reed's courage in asking the question that started it all.